Hey, and welcome back to episode 2 of the Sobriety.Matters podcast. Just a quick reminder that you can now find the podcast and episodes on all of the major podcast platforms, including Apple Podcasts and Spotify. And if you would so kindly rate and review the podcast, that way it'll help us rank better and reach those looking for a voice in sobriety. So, now down to business in this episode. Holy cow. This episode, I sat down with Seija, who is a sober mom out of Colorado, and I'll leave it at that and let her tell her own story. This woman has a voice and a passion so deeply rooted in her sobriety that the power of her message is absolutely phenomenal. We touch on why you deserve so much more than addiction, the ongoing spiritual awakenings that occur in sobriety, and the comfort and healing that comes with recovering out loud. So let's jump in here and have a chat with Seija. Hello, Seija, and welcome to the Sobriety Matters podcast. I want to thank you so much for taking some time out of your day to sit down and chat with me.
Thank you for having me.
So let's kick things off here and have you tell us a little bit about yourself. Maybe how long have you been sober? Maybe tell us a little bit about where you live now, family, and some of your favorite things to do in sobriety.
Okay, I currently live in the Denver metro area, right between Boulder and Denver. I originally grew up in the Chicago suburbs. I am the fifth of six girls, and my sobriety date is April 10th, 2015. So, in about 2.5 weeks, one day at a time, I'll celebrate 6 years. So I really like to, I have three kids, 19, 15, and 10. And I really like to get out and explore with them. Just kind of put the electronics away and see where the car takes us and get lost.
That is awesome, and I love that. I love that you mentioned one day at a time because that's how many of us live our days in sobriety. But it's interesting that I found you on Instagram and was immediately drawn to you because we both have one day at a time tattooed on our biceps. And so as soon as I saw that, I'm like, oh, that this gal's cool. I've got to definitely follow this one. So well, thanks for a little background there. Let's jump right into this and let's have you tell us, a little bit about the backstory, kind of history of your drinking, and what maybe some of the key factors that you've identified that led us down that path of addiction.
Sure. Uh, when I share really any part of my story, I really try to focus on the strength and hope part. I think I try to give just enough of the experience to, and I'm not a fan of the word qualify. I don't think I need to qualify or earn my seat. I think as long as I feel like I need to be here, that's good enough. Um, so I, again, grew up in the northwest suburbs of Chicago. I grew up playing sports all my life. And I also grew up hearing that my dad was allergic to alcohol. It was not truly until I came into the rooms of recovery that I found out what that really meant. So I had a pretty normal upbringing. I always say that with the caveat of for a house full of women would be. We went on the Oprah show when I was in eighth grade. It was about sibling rivalries and arguing over clothes. And so there was always a lot of chaos, and not necessarily in a dramatic way, but just a lot of stuff, a lot of uh, sometimes feeling like, and what I've learned in recovery is that I think I felt like I had to do stuff to get attention. I had to, uh, I played varsity sports all through high school, and that got my parents' attention, that got my sister's attention, that got friends' attention. And when I learned really that when I would do things like that, it would get positive attention. I really strayed away from doing a lot of the negative things. I didn't really drink in high school until really the end of senior year. And I think remembering the first time I drank and that it was a blackout was very telling for me. I think it was a microscope really into what my addiction would look like eventually, whenever I got to that point. And so I had my oldest when I was 20. I had another at 24 and then another at 28. So really, I think I like to sum my 20s up by really having babies, raising babies, and working. I didn't really have time for much else. And I think in that time, I really lost who I was. I lost who I was as a woman. I lost who I was as anything more than a mom. And I wasn't really sure what to do with that. I didn't know better at the time. I didn't know that there were better tools to use than I'll just drink. I'll just go out and drink or I'll stay in and drink. And for a couple of years, probably 30 to 32, I was going out with friends almost every weekend. And my husband at the time would be home with the kids, and I would come home at 7 or 8 in the morning. And I just didn't see anything wrong with it. I was home and I had been home all week with the kids, taking care of them. I deserved to get out. I deserved to have fun. And, in that hindsight kind of process of really doing the deep work, I've really learned that that's just not true. That I deserve so much more than just numbing things away. And really, um, that was no coping mechanism at all. So in August of 2014, we moved from the Chicago suburbs, exactly 1,000 miles door to door, to the Denver metro area. I knew no one. I didn't have to know anyone. My older two kids could walk to school, and my youngest was 4. So I would get the older two off to school, and I would take the youngest to the liquor store, come home, and I would drink all day, almost every day. And on Thursday, April 9th, my sister, who is just older than me, flew in from Virginia. Um, Still to this day, I have not been able to really get an honest answer from either of them as to whether that was an intentional intervention. It was it seemed very planned out. But I also think at that point in my active addiction, I was almost so paranoid that everyone knew how much I was drinking that it really didn't matter. So he went and picked her up from the airport that night. I don't remember her coming home. I don't remember giving her a hug or having a conversation that I supposedly had with her. And all I remember is waking up at about 2 o'clock in the morning. And I was sitting up on the couch and I was profusely sweating. And that had been happening for probably about 3 weeks at that point, where I was shaking so much and sweating so much I couldn't even sleep. And all I would do is take a drink as soon as I would wake up, and it would relax me, which is so contrary to what it should be doing, and what tool I should be using to relax me. So I looked over at her, and she was sitting up wide awake and she had tears in her eyes. And I said, "What are you doing?" And she said, "I was afraid if I fell asleep that you wouldn't wake up." I said, "Why?" She said, "You don't even remember me coming here." And I didn't. She was right. So fast forward about 5 more hours that night or morning, um, my ex-husband called me out to the garage, and in the driveway he had opened the back of his work truck, and there were 2 large black plastic bags full of empty vodka bottles. And he said, "You need to do 3 things. You need to go to rehab, you need to go to meetings, and you need to call a counselor, or I'm going to take our kids and go back to Illinois." And I think that that was really the first of many spiritual awakenings I've had. And I think when I heard people say stay for the miracle, I would have left a long time ago if I only stayed for one. And when he said that, it was like something came over me, almost the sense of relief, like I've been caught. Oh, thank God I don't have to do this anymore. Maybe I can get help. Something came over me that was almost relaxing. And I remember I remember so vividly standing there, looking at him in the eye. I had glasses on, I had a fat lip and blood all over me from the night before. I don't know how I got it. And we had our youngest soccer pictures the next day, so that was a really pleasant memory. But I remember looking at his face and I said, "You will never take my kids away from me." And that was it. That was all I needed to say, almost to give myself the strength and motivation and some little push to do better. So something inside me was telling me, okay, call meetings, call, find a meeting somewhere, call rehabs, call counselors, but whatever you do, don't go to the rehab. Just call around, ask about places, just don't go. Something was telling me that. I don't know. I don't know what it was. I have a friend in recovery and she always says, "Well, was it odd or was it God?" And it just drives me so crazy because it's never odd, like I got it. You're right. There's no coincidences. But something was telling me if I went away, that my kids would be taken away anyway, because at that time there were no court papers in order. There were no parenting. There was no parenting plan in place. He could have. Anyone would have realized that. So anyway, I did not go to rehab. I found a recovery program where I sat down in the room and looked around and honestly felt like I belonged, felt like I was hearing people share a story that was so similar to mine that it was almost eerie. And really, I think what I needed was to connect with people. So here I am out here in Denver, truly not knowing anyone. And I I had to get to know people. I had to get out of myself and get to know people, or I was going to be stuck in that isolation again. And that isolation is really what took me down at the end. The lack of accountability. I was in a group text with my mom and my sisters, and I could text them while I was drinking, and no one would know. I didn't have to see them. They were all 1,000 miles away. So it was really, being able to do a lot of the hard work in sobriety has led me to find out that all of those little pieces, the move, it was really an intentional geographic. Oh yeah, that sounds great. Let's go on an adventure. And it did sound great. It sounded like an adventure. But I knew inside that I was also running, and that really wasn't the smartest thing. But at the same time, and I shared this with someone else one day, I really think that all of those steps led me up to that place I needed to get in order to want to change and want to do better. And I wouldn't be who I am today. I wouldn't be where I am today had I not gone through those things. So that's really, I think, one of the most powerful pieces I take away from early sobriety was just knowing, okay, if I can get through today, tomorrow will be better. And and then slowly picking up tools that I could use along the way. And it seemed to work for me. I mean, honestly, if you would have told me almost 6 years ago that I would still be sober today, I would not have believed you. 6 years seemed like an eternity to me back then. 6 months did. And then all of a sudden, here I am. It's crazy. It feels like yesterday and an entire lifetime ago, because it really is a lifetime ago for me.
That is amazing. There is so much there, and there's so much there that I can relate to. One of the one of the things that really hits, that I think a lot of folks in early sobriety, or probably more with the sober curious, is that relief piece that you talked about. I can remember, so I actually, in a way, had a reverse intervention, with my family. My drinking was kind of more discovered through my career. and a couple people at work had approached me, and then basically that day I knew I had known I had had a problem for quite some time, and that day I knew that's it. I have to go get help, and came home and talked to my family about that, and that relief hadn't hit quite yet. And that next day when I showed up at the rehab facility, it was literally when I walked through the door, they took my blood pressure and checked me, physically, and they said, "Okay, we're going to take you to your room." That's when it hit me, and it literally felt like, I mean, you can say a ton. I mean, it was 10,000 pounds had been lifted off of me, and I had never felt a calm that came over me when that happened. So
Mhm.
I think it's so important for folks to hear that, when you are ready and find someone to talk to, that relief that's going to come is just going to be mind blowing for you. So
Mhm.
so that is a wonderful story, of the background there for you. You talked about some of the tools, that you've learned along the way. Can you talk to us a little bit about what those look like for you, and maybe some things that folks could grab out of how you're going about it?
Sure. It's interesting. People will ask me, friends or people who are sober curious or people who have been in recovery for a long time will say things like, "Well, what do you do that keeps you sober today?" And I think for me, the easy answer is I do what worked for me on day one and two. I I feel like I've finally fine-tuned this kind of routine for myself. And I used to be so nervous about change. Like, we couldn't move the furniture around when I was younger because it would make me anxious. And so when I first really started to get this kind of morning routine, you know, my morning routine is the same every day. I try to keep it in place because I try to look at it myself from the perspective of, if I don't take care of myself first, and you've probably heard me say that before, but it is the whole oxygen mask analogy. There is a reason on an airplane they tell you to put the oxygen mask on yourself first. You cannot take care of anyone else well if you're not breathing. And it's that simple. And it took me really a long time to get that. It took me a long time, even in sobriety, I think, to fine tune that. But my alarm goes off bright and early. I feel like I am most productive. I am most awake early because it's my quiet time. No one else is awake. The house is quiet. And in turn, it gives me a quietness inside. So I can sit and I read and I journal every morning. And whether that's writing 2 pages or whether it's writing 2 lines, 2 lines are sometimes more impactful than 2 pages. To me, it depends on what I need to get out, just something. And I feel like I've always had a better way of verbalizing myself by writing it down rather than vocalizing it. So that just works for me. I read a lot of um, recovery literature. I also try to do some kind of daily devotional, and whether that's looking something up on an app on my phone, something little. But I think the biggest piece is, and then I get to the gym. I try to get, I'm at the gym by 4:45 or something, but I have to be, because I have to get home, get my kids ready for school, get ready for work, and be out the door by 7:30. So if I don't take care of those things first, then I fall last every day. And I think this routine has worked well for me because it's almost kind of reaffirming to myself every day that daily commitment of putting my worth, my self-care, my self-love first, instead of getting to the end of the day and going, "Oh, I guess I should get to the gym." I don't want things to feel like a task like that. I'd rather be playing a board game with my 10-year-old or skating with him, something fun than making those things that are really integral to my sobriety feel like a chore. So I think it's what I try to say is finding what worked for me was the best part of this, because I tried so many different things. I couldn't sit in meditation for longer than 2 minutes for a long time. I would sit there and I would like open one eye and I'd look around, and I'd be like, okay, it's been 3 minutes, I gotta go. And now I can just sit and I can just be and I can listen and I can quiet my heart and quiet my soul. I feel like that's why I try to say like mind, body, and soul work, because the reading and the journaling and the quiet, and then I go to the gym and sweat it all out. And that just seems to work well for me. And I can carry those daily tools then throughout my day. Just because I'm sober doesn't mean those things don't happen. Doesn't mean someone doesn't cut you off in traffic. And I'm try to be very positive, but I'm also realistic. Not everything is this whole Holly positive world. I try to be realistic about life at the same time, but just because those things are happening around me, I control how I react. So whether I'm, turning into this road rage crazy woman with my 10-year-old next to me, or I'm like, you know what, maybe someone's having a bad day. Who knows? I'm not in a rush. We're okay. And that's when I'm able to pause. That's when I'm able to take a deep breath all throughout the day. And it doesn't mean that every day is like that. Bad days happen all the time, but the bad days are what help me really appreciate the good. So
Yeah, and something you touched on there is how important it is to make sure the first thing you do is focus on your sobriety. That took me a while to learn because when you start to go into the rooms and you start to work with those that have some sustained sobriety, you start to see how egotistical you were, how selfish you were, but at the same time you're also learning, if this is going to work for me, I have to be selfish. And you start hearing this like two-sided message, but then it quickly flips and you're like, now I get it. It's positive selfishness that I need to learn and I need to do. And that's such a key thing, because the the second you stop working for, on that, first off, everything else is shambles, and it's just not going to work for you. So, and something else you touched on, and this is from one of your shares that I've seen on your Instagram account, and maybe we could talk a little bit about that. Is you know controlling what you can control and what you can't, and the way that you kind of touched on this were, there's basically three groups of folks that know you: those from your drinking days, those that met you in sobriety, and then those that know you in both. And I thought how you kind of spoke to that was really, really um eye opening and touching, and I think there's a very good message there. So I just wanted to see if maybe you could touch on that you had shared through that account here as well.
yeah, I think, it's interesting. When I first got onto Instagram at the very beginning, I didn't share much. My intent was not to share about recovery. And I honestly didn't start sharing about my sobriety until I was about 2.5 years sober. I don't know what clicked at that point, but something changed in me where I realized that what I was carrying, what I had been through, the lessons I'd learned, the lessons I was learning, good and hard, were probably things that other people were going through too. And that's why I try to share so authentically and genuinely all the time. Um, so, with that one in particular, I think for me, that's really a lot of my life. There are people who only knew me when I was drinking. There are people who have only ever known me in recovery. And then there are those people who fall into that middle category and who have really loved me through everything. And mostly that middle group is family and a select few friends from high school. And I think the important part for me is that learning that that first group of people who I only ever drank with, when I got sober, it really showed me a lot about friendships. It showed me a lot about who was I really as a friend to other people, and were we just drinking buddies? And I really had to do a lot of work on letting that go, that part of it, because it hurt. All of a sudden, I didn't have, friends I'd had for 15 years. Well, all we ever did was drink together. So were they really friends? Maybe not. And then the people who have only known me in recovery are honestly some of the most special people to me because they stood with me and my kids through some really hard times and walked with us and held me and cried with me. And my when my dad died 5 days before I had a year of sobriety, they were the ones who were there. And I think that it's really, I don't know, it's one of, there's a million gifts I think that I've been given in sobriety, but the friendship piece, really learning who I can count on and who can count on me. What kind of friend am I back to them? So I think it's invaluable really for me to be able to do that work of looking back and seeing growth instead of just closing the door and saying I'm not her anymore, I don't want to go back there, because that's not working towards growth for me. I need to see, well, how did I get there, and what work do I need to do to get, how did I get out of there? And I won't learn through those things unless I do the work.
Yeah, that's great. And one of the one of the other things that I had heard in one of your shares is the you help me when I help you. And you kind of touched on that there, that about 2.5 years in to sobriety is when it clicked for you. For me, it was about 15 months. I was pretty open with my sobriety around family and those that knew. But at about 15 months, I was on a podcast, and she asked me at the end, she's like, "Have you come out on social media?" And I said, "No, I've not. I've, I've said a few things here, I've said a few things there, but I've never done an official post." And I said, "I'm probably going to use this as that tool to put out there." And she warned me. She said, "When you do that," she said, "just be prepared for the response that you're going to get."
Mm,
And I kind of said, "Uh-oh." And she was like, "Oh no, it's going to be a positive response." And she said, "You're going to hear from people you had no idea." And she
mhm,
said, "This is going to be your next step to, helping others and helping them get down the path." And I heard you talk about that as well. And I have found that's one of the biggest things for me, to make
mhm.
this thing right and keep me rooted in what I need to. And this is why I'm doing this. So yeah, that's good. Uh, so you've got some sustained sobriety here. Have you experienced relapse in your time, or have you pretty much stuck to sobriety from day one?
Relapse is not part of my story as of today. And I think the further, I want to touch on what you just asked about with the you help me and I help you part. And then it ties into this question as well. I got a message about 2 weeks ago. I grew up in this tiny little town. Um, we joined towns. We joined with the town next to us for high school. So it was this little tiny small town area. And since I started to share out loud, um, and I think for me, I didn't even consciously like say, all right, I'm just going to put this out there. Like one day I just said something about being a sober mom, or I said something, I think it might have been on my 1 year, and that was all I said, was I'm a year sober, and then I just kept going on with life. And then, about 2 years in, this woman said to me, you have a voice that you can use for the positive, and you have experiences that a lot of people have probably been through. Why don't you share that? And I was like, I don't really have anything to share. And that was always my standard answer. When I first got asked to share in early sobriety, before I even had a year, I'm like, I don't have anything to share. And this woman who was like 7 days sober, she's like, you have more to share than I do. I'm like, oh gosh, okay, you're right. So I learned that the more I shared, the more confidence it gave me in who I was sober and what I had to bring to the table sober. So one of the coolest things, I don't share everything that I share on Instagram onto Facebook. I just don't. It to me, they're totally different mediums. It's just a different group. So I just happened to share something about 3 weeks ago, and I got a message from someone I had gone to high school with and not heard from in 25 years. And all it said was, I can't even tell you how great it is that you're owning your sobriety. I had nearly 6 years and relapsed, and now I'm on day 55. And I must have sat there and read that like 5 times. And I was like, okay, God, I got it. Like, I'm at nearly 6 years. Maybe I need to get out of myself just a little bit. And for me, those little nudges, those little, when I get a message from somebody just saying, what you wrote today or something you said today really touched me. I I don't share things so that people will say, "Gosh, I really like you." I share so that people will say, "Wow, I learned something about myself. Wow, I never thought about that." Or I've been feeling that and I didn't know how to say it. And I think that's why I feel like it's so much more reciprocal than me just helping someone, because it always seems to get me out of myself. I get really almost squirrely right around this time. Like from a month and a half out to my sobriety date, I think about where I was. I think about what I was doing, how I still had, 3 weeks left of hell and 3 weeks left that I don't even remember before my sobriety date. And then I think of all the, what ifs. What if I had gotten sober sooner? Um, what if I never came in? What if I was still drinking? What if, and I remember about a week and a half ago, I was journaling and I was feeling that way. I hadn't been sleeping well, and my alarm goes off at like 3:57, and I woke up and it was like 2:40. And I just laid there, I'm like, come on. So I just grabbed my pen and my paper and I just started journaling, and I just started writing, what am I feeling? What's going on? Why do I feel this swirliness? And I started writing about the what ifs. Well, I feel like I'm stuck in the what if I'd gotten sober sooner? What if this happened? And it like clicked in my brain, and I just kept writing, and I just wrote, when I focus on the what if, I lose what is right here, right now, in this moment. Who am I right now? Who are my kids? How can I help them grow? Who are the people who need me right now? And if I'm looking forward or looking back, I'm not here. And it was like something dropped off me when I said that, wrote that out, got that out. And that's one of the most healing pieces of journaling for me, is that once it's on paper, it's not stuck in my head anymore. And so for me, that helping other people part is so much more about getting out of me. It is that selfish piece of giving back.
Yeah, and I think that touches on something in sobriety too that I have found very important is, living in the now. You get into your past, and really all that will do is drive you, to depression. You start living in the future, and all that starts to do is create anxiety. And learning that mindfulness and living in the now, and finding the tools and the steps to get there. I was actually just talking to someone today about, I'm not the best at mindfulness yet, but I've gotten myself over the last, like, I don't know, 3, 4 months. I've gotten into like 2 or 3 days to where I've really caught that mindfulness, and I'm like,
Mm,
holy crap! I'm like, if I can figure this thing out, this is gonna be awesome.
mhm,
I really want to get this going. So yeah, so that's that. Yeah, that now piece is huge. And so many people, I personally don't journal. I probably should, but I don't. But so many people talk to me about that, and that's their avenue, to really getting it out of them, because otherwise it sits inside of them, and eats them
mhm.
up. So um let's let's talk about getting sober. What, when you were when you were still in active addiction, what were some of your, maybe some of your biggest misconceptions, of getting sober? And then as you've done it, what's some of your biggest surprises, from it?
Um, that's a good question. I think even now I have misconceptions about sobriety. And I think, again, what I try to what I try to say is that I want to always remain teachable. The moment, and those three words, you got this, drive me up the wall, because I don't ever want to feel like I've got this. I feel like, for me, the second I say, I've got this, I'm in trouble, I kind of let off the gas a little. I kind of go into cruise control, autopilot, and that makes me nervous. And I think, coming into sobriety, I had no intention of staying sober. That didn't cross my mind. I came in to learn how to drink just a little bit less, maybe a little more responsibly, but not to ever not drink again. And I went through a lot of really hard life things in my first year, and I feel like what that taught me was really to live in that one day at a time part. And when I came into sobriety with this, I mean, I had all those preconceived notions. I didn't look like anyone in that room. I didn't do any of the things they did. I didn't drink like them. They didn't drink like me. None of it. And I remember really thinking that if I stayed in that mindset, I was going to stay in that mindset. And I wasn't going to keep growing. I wasn't going to learn a thing. And I had women around me who came around me, and they didn't coddle me, and I didn't need to be coddled. I didn't need to be told, you're okay, everything's okay, because it wasn't, and I wasn't. I needed to be told, if you don't change everything, you are going to be stuck right here, and you're going to lose everything. You're already fighting for your kids. What more do you want to go away before you actually get this? So I really had to drop so many of those barriers, and brown bag under a bridge picture in my head. And that's the picture that's always used. But I think it's always used because that's what we see. That's what I see when I see someone who really has a drinking problem. And that wasn't me. I wasn't that person yet. And that was one of the most critical words for me at the beginning of sobriety, was when I heard people say yet. When I would say, I don't have a DUI, I didn't lose my kids yet. Keep drinking, go drink tomorrow, and that will happen to you. So I think, going through sobriety, I really have had to, um, I think I've really had to do a lot of internal work at the beginning, um, which again is why I got one day at a time on my arm. I told myself, at the beginning of sobriety, when I was so tired of hearing people say, one day at a time, keep coming back. I'm like, oh my gosh, I've been here 65 times in a month. I'm coming back. But for me, when I really got what one day at a time meant, that meant just living today. That didn't mean not planning for tomorrow or being responsible about what tomorrow needs, but it meant not living in the fear of what could happen or anxiety of what could happen, and not living in what I've done. When I was able to go through the steps and really get rid of all of that, I was really able, I think, to be present and be present in conversation with people. That wasn't something I thought that I ever did before. And when I could sit and talk with someone and say, I'm here, you're there, what's going on? I'm here to listen and actually be a good listener. Those were all new concepts to me in sobriety, and it didn't seem like it should be, I guess.
Yeah, listening. What the hell is that, right? I
Yeah,
I didn't
right.
even know what that was. So yeah, so yeah. Um, it, you touched on so much there again. It's just incredible. I think y- you have a great set of tools. You've got some time under your belt, but something that I think is interesting, and even for me, was lockdown and the pandemic, because it changed so much.
Mhm.
For you, did you have to shift some of the things that you were doing? And if so, what have you found that's working, and making it work in lockdown? And then also, has it taught you anything else, about yourself that you maybe didn't know? And how are you using that as a positive,
Hmm.
as that's been happening?
Yeah, I think the simple answer is yes, of course. I think we all had to adapt in some way. I think in terms of my job is considered essential, so I was still out of the house all the time. Still have been out of the house all the time. But my kids were here remote learning, so I had to really change, get everything set up for desks, get things set up for them to work, make sure they were actually working, make sure there was enough food in the house all of a sudden for them to eat, because then they eat 12 times a day when they're home all of a sudden. I don't think they do that at school, but whatever. But all of those little things, and I think for me, um, I think my sobriety date is April 10th, so it was only 3 weeks into this, and I had this whole plan. It was my 5 year last year. I Every year I've taken the day off of work and I've gone hiking by myself, and I've just gone wherever I find, really, somewhere that I haven't been, just just to get out, just to explore and be and kind of celebrate with myself. Like, okay, we did this again. Now let's keep going. We're not done, but take a minute, appreciate how far I had grown in a year. And, I try to write down, where do I see myself? What do I want to grow in? Where do I see my sobriety going? Because it's such a critical part of my life that, someone said to me recently, all you ever talk about is sobriety. And it was interesting because I think it was really meant to be like a dig on me. And I turned and I said, that's the only thing I really talk about, or the first thing I talk about, because if I don't have my sobriety, I don't have anything else. So that's my simple answer on that part. But so really, it was 3 weeks before my sobriety birthday, and all of a sudden everything was here in Zoom. And I think it was probably a week before, probably the beginning of April 3rd or so. And I remember, I was on a women's meeting, and it was a meeting I had chaired for a year and a half every Thursday night. So it was the same women who were on there. And a lot of them were older and they were kind of technologically challenged, trying to figure this out. And I remember looking at the screen and thinking, okay, I think this is where that part on page 417 comes into play. Acceptance. That's it. I can accept that we are right here, or I can be bitter and pissed off that we can't sit next to each other in a meeting, that I can't sit across from someone wanting to work in sobriety, from another woman, we can't meet for coffee, and then I would still be miserable. And then I'm jeopardizing my sobriety. And then I'm not able to help anybody. Where I can sit here and talk with people and, you know, do what we're doing and kind of power through it. And I think that's just honestly, I think it's just my mentality. I think it's just always been my personality. I'm that positive part of it. It's so easy to look at the negative. And everybody can do that. It's just like when they say at the gym, it's so easy to give up. Everybody does it. But what happens if you keep going? And so for me, I mean, honestly, I am on the same meeting at 6 o'clock almost every night. And I'm accountable there because people are counting on me to show up. I'm counting on other people to show up. I've invited people. I think for me, again, it goes back to the acceptance. I think it is the most amazing thing that I can sit on a screen. Last Saturday night, I spoke at a meeting on the East Coast. I've never been to New Jersey. All of a sudden, I'm in a room with people from New Jersey and people all over the country. I mean, how cool is that? All we get to share recovery with people all over, and it's the same message over and over. I think that that's where it settled with me, and it's so easy to look at the negative part. I can't do that anymore. I can't live that way anymore.
Yeah, and I think that's one of the biggest things that I've seen online. I work in the tech world, and online has been something for me since I was 14 years old.
Mhm.
AOL Instant Messenger, and that's just how I grew up. And
You're
but
dating yourself a little
yeah,
there.
yeah, I know, I know. But it's wild because I do feel like it's creating a platform for the sobriety voice that it just hasn't been there, or I think folks haven't, we've not thought about it. And now it's, the Instagram world is been crazy to me. It's the amount that I'm seeing on there. Podcasts had been coming around, and these things have been happening for a little bit. But I'm just starting to see so much more being
Mhm.
shared, and it's just awesome. Um, so you touched a couple times on health and fitness, and I know the listeners can't see it, but you've got the sober AF sweatshirt on there, and I know the Valor Fitness is a big thing for you. But talk to your fitness and how that has worked into a big piece of your sobriety, because I don't want to put words in your mouth, but I'm going to go out on a limb that's pretty important for you. So
Yeah, it's interesting. I think I sometimes, not sometimes, I think I often underestimate really how much I've changed physically until I see something side by side or someone else says it. And I am the worst Midwesterner at a compliment. You tell me, oh, your hair looks nice, or oh, you look stronger, and I'm going to tell you I bought my dress at Target for $2. So that's where the conversation goes. So when people will say things like, a guy at the gym the other day, he said, I've watched you here at this one for a year and a half, and you have changed so much. And I was like, really? He's like, do you think I would come up to you and tell you that if you hadn't? I'm like, I don't know. So I think for me, the fitness piece is honestly just a part of my life. It's just it is part of it's like me saying, I'm never going to journal again. I'm never going to read again. I couldn't imagine not doing either of those. And I couldn't imagine not going to the gym. It just it just helps set me right and set me on this path every morning to really feeling well. And when I first came into sobriety, about 2 weeks before I got sober, I will never forget. I walked past the bathroom mirror and like had my breath taken away. And I turned back and looked, and I could paint what that reflection looked like, and I didn't know who she was. And I think that was my first glimmer into something really needing to change. And quickly, you know, I try to really explain it as honestly, once I stopped pouring poison into my body, my body really changed. But it was also I was going through a divorce. I was going through a lot of really stressful things and not taking care of my health well. And then about a year into sobriety, I started to go to the gym. And I had been, I played sports all growing up. But I'd never been fit. I'd never felt strong. I just felt like, okay, I could play basketball. I can hit a home run. I can play softball, but I didn't feel strong. And I think for me, that feeling of feeling strong, like, this morning at the gym, I had this thought. I asked a guy to spot me on shoulder press, and he's like, I would love to. I love to watch you work out here. You just push yourself. And I'm like, oh, okay, that's weird, but whatever. So, but we all just joke together because it's the same crew at 4:30 in the morning. And
Yeah.
when we finished, he's like, I think you're much stronger than you give yourself credit for because you could have done a lot more weight. And when I put the weights down, it's like a feeling of empowerment for me. I feel strong. And that's why my routine is the same every day. I feel like I'm ready to take the day on, whatever it brings at me. And my sobriety will remain at the forefront no matter what the day brings at me because I've taken care of these tools first.
Yeah, that's awesome. I recently, well, last 16 months have really gotten into the Peloton, and my wife and some of the other folks that watch me ride, who have now gotten them, I can get my own head and I'm like, oh, I didn't PR. Or, man, that was a lackadaisical ride. And people are like, do you realize the numbers that you're riding at? And I'm like, no, not really. And then,
Yeah.
I do look at it and I kind of compare and I'm like, oh yeah, well, maybe I shouldn't have said that to them, but it's so important for me. It's that drive piece every day that I get on there. I'm like, well, if I'm not going hard, then why am I doing it? And
Hmm.
I'm kind of the same way in my sobriety. It's like, well, if I'm not doing it hard, then why the hell would I do it? Like, I'm going to do this and we're
Yeah,
going to
it
do it
might be
right.
that all in or all out
Yeah,
mentality.
it could be. There might be something there, yeah.
Yeah.
And I loved your comments about the Midwesterners. So I live in Indianapolis, just outside of Indianapolis, and I grew up about an hour and a half northwest of there. So not in what they call the region of Chicago, but
Mhm.
I'm pretty close, and it's so
It's
spot
so
on.
true, isn't
Oh, it's
it?
so true.
Yes.
It's so true. So
Still, and I
yeah,
can't I don't know, I can't no matter what.
yeah,
Even
yeah.
even when that guy and I really admire him. He's in his late 50s. He is at the gym every day and he's sweating profusely every day. And he stopped me just to say that. And when I walked away, I remembered hearing in a meeting when you dismiss someone else's compliment, you're really dismissing them because they're like, first of all, he's going out of his way to say that. And he meant it genuinely. So then when I disregard it, like, oh yeah, yeah, not really. He's like, no, but I really meant that. And how hard is it to just say thank you and walk away? No one needs to know I got it at TJ Maxx for $9. They don't care.
Oh, it is so
I'll
good.
get that one day. I'm going to get that.
There's an Instagram account. I can't think of the name of it right now, but it's Midwestern Sayings or Midwestern.
Yes.
Oh, and
I saw that on there. I'm like, oh my gosh, I feel attacked.
they post stuff, and I'm like, that could not be more true.
Yes,
It
like
is
saying,
absolutely.
picking, in Chicago, we don't say I love you. We say I'll pick you up from O'Hare.
Yeah, that's so true. Oh, that is awesome. So, speaking of social media, where can folks find you out in the world? Are you, on Instagram? Are there any other sober communities or anywhere? Where can people find you?
I really am just on Instagram. I mostly I share um, on Facebook as well, but mostly on Instagram. And again, what anytime that I'm asked to share any part of my story, I share a link to that anywhere because that's how that's how I help really heal too, is to get my stuff out.
Right. Yeah, and I'll be sure to link to that in the show notes. It's s.nelson42, right? Did I get that right?
Yep. Yep.
Awesome. That's
Nothing,
good
no
stuff.
sober,
Nope.
cool handle,
Ah,
just
you don't need it. Your shares and your story bring all of that out. So, just to wrap up here, I want to hand you the mic, and kind of give us a closing of what do you want to say to those that may still be struggling, those that are sober curious, in early sobriety, have sustained sobriety, and maybe struggling at this moment. What's your advice?
I think the simplest thing that I can say is never give up. As cliche and um, you know, cheesy as that sounds, you are so worth it. And the first time I heard that in recovery, I didn't believe it. I didn't believe I was worth it because I had been told I wasn't. I felt I wasn't. What I learned is that when I got into recovery and found people who loved me right where I was, right who I am currently, not who I should be or who they want me to be, but right here, that was when I really started to change and grow. And what I try to share with anyone who feels like they're struggling is really to know that you are never alone, ever. I mean, there are thousands of people out there, and I say it, and I truly mean that anytime anyone reaches out to me, it takes 30 seconds to say, "Here's my number, call me." And it's that littlest bit of hope that I can give to someone else that was given to me at the beginning of sobriety, just enough to put that little glimmer in to know that everything would be okay. And that as long as you keep going, just do the next right thing. It's all the cliches, really one day at a time. One of the biggest things I try to share is that the brain can only think one thing at a time. So if I'm, especially in early sobriety, I would be triggered or craving something or just out of my mind, and I would start singing or I would say the serenity prayer and it was gone. And that has been really helpful for me still today. So I think no matter where you are in this journey, whether you are sober curious or you have 30 years of sobriety, give back to those people who are where you were, and that's all I can do today.
Say this has been absolutely phenomenal. You have an incredible story, an incredible voice. Your share is extremely, extremely powerful. So I hope you keep it up. I do want to say thank you for joining me here, and I look forward to following along and continuing the walk, in recovery with you. And with that, one day at a time. And thank you again.
Thank you for having me.